In the summer of 1995, a young couple from Denver, Colorado vanished on their way to a weekend camping trip in the Cascade Mountains. They never checked in at the ranger station. Their silver Honda Accord was never found. And for nearly 30 years, there were no leads, no witnesses, no closure, until a catastrophic wildfire swept through the region in the spring of 2024, uncovering a long-sealed access tunnel buried deep beneath the forest floor. What federal investigators found inside the darkness would not only rewrite everything they thought they knew about this case, but would reveal a pattern of disappearances that had been hidden in plain sight for decades. Before we begin, if you're fascinated by cold cases, forensic mysteries, and stories of survival against impossible odds, make sure you're subscribed to Ultimate Crime Stories. We bring you the most compelling true crime investigations from across America, and trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next. April 23rd, 2024. Location, Jefferson County, Colorado. The fire had burned for 9 straight days. Smoke still clung to the mountain ridges like a dirty blanket, and the air tasted like ash and charcoal. Marcus Brennan navigated his Forest Service utility vehicle along what used to be a fire access road, now just a strip of blackened earth cutting through a graveyard of trees. He was with the Colorado Division of Land Management, part of the last assessment team allowed into the restricted burn zone. Their job was simple on paper. Check for structural hazards, unstable terrain, hidden hotspots that could reignite the blaze. But what Marcus noticed that afternoon wasn't smoke or collapsing timber. It was something strange, almost geometric, jutting out from a collapsed hillside where the intense heat had literally peeled back layers of earth and rock. He slowed the vehicle to a crawl, then stopped completely. Through the haze, he could make out what looked like a concrete frame, partially exposed, with rusted metal plating that had warped and bubbled from a fire. It wasn't natural. It wasn't recent either. He grabbed his radio and stepped out into the scorched landscape, boots crunching over brittle, carbonized wood. The closer he got, the more wrong it felt. This wasn't just debris. It was an entrance. A sealed access tunnel with a heavy steel door that had been welded shut decades ago, now partially torn open by the shifting ground. Stenciled on the metal, barely visible under layers of rust and soot, were faded yellow letters. Cascade Junction, Tunnel 14, closed 1968. Marcus crouched down, brushing away debris with his gloved hand. The door had cracked at the hinges. He could see into the darkness beyond. And that's when he saw it. A small object, wedged just inside the entrance. Plastic, faded blue, partially melted, but intact. He pulled it free. It was a wallet. Inside, protected by the sealed environment, was a driver's license with a smiling face staring back at him. The name read, Emily Catherine Porter. Issue date, March 14, 1995. Expiration, March 14, 2000. Marcus stood slowly, his heart pounding in his chest. He looked back into that dark tunnel, the beam of his flashlight barely penetrating the void. This wasn't just an old mining access point. This was the last place Emily Porter and her boyfriend, Daniel James Caldwell, had been seen alive. April 24, 2024. Denver, Colorado. The morning after the discovery, Detective Sarah Ortiz sat in her office at the Denver Metro Cold Case Unit, staring at a bulletin board that had haunted her for the past 5 years. Pinned to the center were 2 photographs. Emily Porter and Daniel Caldwell, missing since June 7, 1995. Emily had been 23 years old. Blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail, bright smile, wearing a University of Colorado sweatshirt in her photo. She worked as a veterinary assistant and volunteered at an animal rescue on weekends. Daniel was 25, dark hair, wire-rimmed glasses, studying geology. They looked like every hopeful young couple from the mid-90s. The kind of people who went on road trips with disposable cameras and handwritten directions. The kind of people who were supposed to come home. Sarah had inherited their file when she transferred into cold cases. At the time, the assumption had been straightforward. Hiking accident, lost in the wilderness, tragic but not uncommon. Colorado's backcountry was unforgiving. People underestimated trails. They got separated from their groups. They fell. But Sarah had never been satisfied with that explanation. Emily and Daniel weren't reckless. They had experience. Emily had grown up camping with her family every summer. Daniel had completed wilderness survival training as part of his degree program. And there were details that never quite added up. They had been seen at a gas station in Lakewood on the morning of June 7th, filling up their car and buying snacks for the trip. The attendant remembered them because they'd asked for directions to Cascade Point, a popular overlook. After that, nothing. No trace. Their car never turned up. No campsite was ever located. No personal belongings. Just silence. Now, 29 years later, Sarah's desk phone rang. She picked it up on the second ring. "Detective Ortiz," she said. The voice on the other end was rough, urgent. "This is Marcus Brennan, Division of Land Management. You asked to be notified immediately if we found anything else at the tunnel site." Sarah grabbed a pen. "Go ahead." "We cleared about 40 feet of collapsed support beams and debris from inside the access tunnel. We found personal items. A green canvas backpack. Contents include a disposable camera, still sealed in plastic, a water bottle, a compass, and a jacket with a university logo on the back." Sarah's stomach dropped. "What university?" "University of Colorado. There's also something else." We pushed an inspection camera deeper into the tunnel using a remote pole. About 60 feet in, the tunnel opens into what looks like a natural cave system. "And detective, we found a vehicle." Sarah was already standing, grabbing her keys. "What kind of vehicle?" "Silver Honda Accord. Early 90s model. License plates obscured, but the VIN matches the one in your missing persons report. It's Emily Porter's car." Sarah felt the air leave her lungs. After 29 years, they had found it. Wedged inside a tunnel that had been sealed since 1968, hidden behind a door that someone had welded shut from the outside. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a wrong turn or a tragic mistake. This was deliberate. Someone had put that car there. Someone had sealed Emily and Daniel inside. And someone had spent 3 decades making sure no one would ever find them. The drive up to the burn zone took nearly 2 hours. The main highway was still partially closed, and Sarah had to take a series of back roads that wound through blackened hillsides and scorched valleys. The devastation was complete. Trees stood like charred skeletons against a gray sky. The ground was covered in a thick layer of ash that swirled up in clouds with every gust of wind. When she finally reached the access point, there were already several vehicles parked in a makeshift staging area. Floodlights had been set up around the tunnel entrance, and a white forensic tent covered the immediate perimeter. Sarah showed her badge to the officer manning the perimeter and was waved through. Inside the tent, Marcus Brennan was waiting for her along with a forensic technician named Dr. Lisa Chun, who specialized in archaeological recovery. "Detective Ortiz," Marcus said, extending his hand. "Thanks for getting here so fast." Sarah shook his hand and looked past him toward the tunnel entrance. "How stable is it?" Dr. Chun stepped forward. "We've reinforced the first 60 feet with temporary supports. Beyond that, it's a natural limestone cave system. Structurally sound, but we're proceeding carefully. The vehicle is lodged at an angle where the tunnel meets the cave. We haven't attempted to move it yet." Sarah nodded. "What about the backpack and camera?" Dr. Chun handed her a clear evidence bag. Inside was a disposable Kodak camera, the kind you could buy at any drugstore in the 90s. The plastic casing was dirty, but intact. "We believe the film inside is still developable. It's been sealed away from light and moisture for 3 decades. If there are images on that roll, we should be able to recover them." Sarah held the bag up to the light, turning it slowly. This camera had been with Emily and Daniel on what should have been a simple camping trip. Whatever was on this film, it was the last thing they had tried to document. "I want this processed immediately. Rush it through the lab. I don't care what it costs." Dr. Chun nodded. "I'll personally oversee the development. We'll use the most conservative methods possible. You should have results by tomorrow morning." Sarah looked back toward the tunnel. "I want to see the vehicle." Marcus hesitated. "It's tight in there, and the air quality isn't great." "I don't care. I need to see it." They descended into the tunnel single file, each wearing a respirator and carrying a high-powered flashlight. The temperature dropped immediately. The walls were damp, covered in mineral deposits that glistened in the beam of their lights. About 50 feet in, the tunnel widened slightly, and Sarah could see where the concrete supports gave way to natural rock formations. And then she saw it. The Honda Accord nosed down at a 45-degree angle, wedged between two massive limestone columns. The front end was crumpled, the windshield shattered. The driver's side door was partially open, hanging on one hinge. Sarah approached slowly, her light sweeping across the interior. The seats were covered in a thick layer of dust and mineral deposits. But she could still see fabric patterns, still make out personal items scattered throughout the cabin. A road atlas lay open on the passenger seat. Fast food wrappers littered the floor. And there, hanging from the rearview mirror, was a small dream catcher with turquoise beads. Emily's mother had mentioned that in her original statement. Emily never drove anywhere without it. Sarah's throat tightened. She circled the vehicle, documenting everything with her own camera. The back seat held a rolled sleeping bag and a small cooler. The trunk was ajar, and inside she could see camping supplies, a tent, a propane stove, a first aid kit. They had been prepared for a weekend in the wilderness. They had planned to come back. On the rear bumper, partially obscured by mud and debris, was a sticker that read, "The mountains are calling and I must go." Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, steadying herself. When she opened them, Dr. Chen was standing beside her. "There's something else you need to see," she said quietly. She led Sarah around to the passenger side of the vehicle and pointed her flashlight at the window. Pressed against the glass, barely visible through the grime, was a handprint. Small, delicate, feminine. "That's not dust," Dr. Chen said. "That's been there since the car was sealed in here. Someone was trying to get out." That night, back at her apartment in Denver, Sarah couldn't sleep. She sat at her kitchen table with the case file spread out in front of her, going through every detail again. The timeline, the witness statements, the search efforts. Emily and Daniel had left Denver at approximately 8:30 on the morning of June 7, 1995. They stopped at a Conoco station in Lakewood at 9:15. The attendant, a man named Robert Perkins, remembered them clearly. Emily had been driving. Daniel had gone inside to pay and buy snacks. They asked for directions to Cascade Point, which was about 40 miles north. Robert had drawn them a simple map on the back of a receipt. That map had never been recovered. The next confirmed sighting was supposed to be at Cascade Point itself. The ranger station there kept a logbook for all visitors. But Emily and Daniel had never signed in. A search was initiated on June 10th, 3 days after they were reported missing by Emily's roommate. Helicopters, search dogs, volunteer teams, they covered hundreds of square miles. They found nothing. Not a single piece of evidence. Not a footprint, not a campfire, not a scrap of clothing. It was as if they had simply vanished into thin air. But now Sarah knew they hadn't vanished. They had been taken. Someone had forced them off the road, or lured them to that tunnel, or intercepted them before they ever reached Cascade Point. And that someone had sealed them inside, welding the door shut, burying them alive in the darkness. The question was, who and why? Sarah pulled out a detailed map of the area and spread it across the table. The tunnel entrance was approximately 12 miles northwest of Cascade Point. Not on the way, not even close. To get there, Emily and Daniel would have had to leave the main highway and take a series of unpaved Forest Service roads. There was no reason for them to do that. Unless someone told them to. Unless someone convinced them there was something worth seeing. Sarah circled the tunnel location on the map. Then she began searching through the case file for any mention of other disappearances in the area around the same time. It took her nearly an hour, but she found something. July 1993, 2 years before Emily and Daniel vanished. A solo hiker named Brandon Mitchell had gone missing in the same general area. His car was found at a trailhead about 8 miles from the tunnel. He was never seen again. October 1997, 2 years after Emily and Daniel. A couple from Wyoming, Thomas and Jennifer Hayes, disappeared while on a scenic drive through the mountains. Their rental car was discovered abandoned on a Forest Service road. They were never found. Sarah stared at the dates. 1993, 1995, 1997. Every 2 years. Like clockwork. She reached for her phone and called Marcus Brennan. He answered on the fourth ring, his voice groggy. Brennan. It's Detective Ortiz. I need you to check something for me. Are there any other sealed tunnels or mine shafts in that area? Anything that was closed down in the 60s or 70s? There was a pause. Yeah, actually. The whole region used to be part of an old mining operation. Most of the tunnels were sealed by the Bureau of Land Management between 65 and 72. Why? How many are we talking about? I'd have to check the records, but probably 15, maybe 20. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. I need a list of every single one. And I need to know if any of them have been disturbed or accessed since they were sealed. Jesus. You think there are more victims? I think we're only seeing the beginning of this. The next morning, Sarah arrived at the forensic lab at 7 a.m. Dr. Chin was already there, standing over a light table where several photographs were laid out in a row. I was just about to call you, she said. We recovered 12 images from a camera. Most of them are exactly what you'd expect. Scenery shots, pictures of Emily and Daniel together, typical vacation photos. But the last 3, she gestured to the far end of the table. These are different. Sarah approached slowly. The first photo showed Emily and Daniel standing in front of their Honda Accord. They were smiling, arms around each other, mountains in the background. Happy, alive, normal. The second photo was a selfie of Emily. She was holding the camera at arm's length, Daniel visible behind her, slightly out of focus. She was making a silly face, tongue sticking out. Carefree. But the third photo made Sarah's blood run cold. It was taken inside a vehicle, but not theirs. The angle suggested it was shot from the back seat. In the foreground, barely visible, was the back of someone's head. Male, wearing a dark baseball cap. In the driver's seat, partially visible through the rearview mirror, was another figure. And through the windshield, in the distance, was a concrete structure. A tunnel entrance. Sarah leaned closer. Can you enhance this? Dr. Chin nodded and pulled up a digital version on her computer screen. She zoomed in on the rearview mirror. The figure's face was partially visible now. Male, probably in his 40s, angular features, dark eyes. And something else. On the dashboard, reflected in the windshield, was a small rectangular object. A sticker or a permit of some kind. Dr. Chun enhanced it further. The text became legible. U.S. Forest Service, authorized personnel. Whoever was driving this vehicle, Sarah said slowly, had federal credentials. Dr. Chin zoomed in on the tunnel entrance visible through the windshield. And they were taking Emily and Daniel directly to that tunnel. Sarah straightened up, her mind racing. This photo was taken from their camera, which means either Emily or Daniel had it with them when they got into this other vehicle. They were documenting something. Maybe they sensed something was wrong. Maybe they were trying to leave evidence. She turned to Dr. Chun. I need everything you can pull from this image. Run the reflection through facial recognition. Enhance that permit. See if you can identify any other details about the vehicle. And I need it yesterday. By noon, Sarah was back at her office, staring at a growing pile of evidence that was painting a disturbing picture. Marcus had sent over the list of sealed tunnels in the region. There were 18 in total, all part of the old Cascade Junction mining complex that had been shut down in the late 60s. And according to the records, only one person had been authorized to access those tunnels for inspection and maintenance purposes in the years following their closure. His name was Raymond Douglas Weber. He had worked for the U.S. Forest Service from 1971 to 2003. His job title, Wilderness Area Supervisor. His responsibilities included monitoring closed mine sites, preventing unauthorized access, and ensuring environmental compliance. He would have had keys. He would have had access. and he would have known every inch of that mountain. Sarah ran his name through every database she had access to. Raymond Douglas Weber, born April 16, 1948, in Helena, Montana. Served in the Army from 67 to 70. Honorable discharge. Hired by the Forest Service in 71. No criminal record. No red flags. Retired in 2003. Last known address, a small property outside of Bailey, Colorado, about 30 miles southwest of the tunnel location. Sarah grabbed her jacket. "I'm going to Bailey," she told her partner, Detective Marcus Stone, who had just walked into the office. "I need you to come with me." Marcus looked at the file she was holding. "What are we walking into?" "I don't know yet, but bring your vest." The drive to Bailey took 40 minutes. The address on file for Raymond Weber led them down a long dirt road that wound through dense pine forest. At the end of a road was a small cabin, weathered and gray, with a rusted metal roof. An old Ford pickup truck, early 2000s model, was parked out front. Sarah and Marcus approached cautiously. The property was eerily quiet. No birds, no wind, just silence. Sarah knocked on the door. No answer. She knocked again, harder this time. "Mr. Weber? This is Detective Ortiz with Denver Metro Police. We need to speak with you." Still nothing. Marcus walked around to the side of the cabin and peered through a window. "Sarah, you need to see this." She joined him at the window. Inside, the cabin was sparse. A small kitchen, a table, a worn couch. But covering one entire wall was a map. A massive, detailed topographical map of the Cascade Junction area. And marked on that map in red ink were circles. Lots of them. Each one numbered. Each one corresponding to a location. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. "We're going in." They tried the door. Locked. Marcus used a small pry bar from their vehicle to force it open. Inside, the cabin smelled like old wood and mildew. They cleared the rooms quickly. Empty. But the map demanded their attention. Sarah approached it slowly, her flashlight illuminating the details. There were 18 red circles, each one marked with a number and a date. Circle 1, July 1993. Circle 2, June 1995. Circle 3, October 1997. The pattern continued every 2 years like clockwork, all the way to Circle 18, March 2013. Beneath the map was a small wooden desk. Sarah opened the top drawer. Inside was a ledger handwritten, with dates and entries. She flipped it open to the first page. Subject 1. Brandon Mitchell. Age 27. Solo hiker. Location. Tunnel 4. Entry date. July 15, 93. Notes. Resistant initially. Secured after 48 hours. Pattern established. Sarah's hands trembled as she turned the page. Subject 2 and 3. Emily Catherine Porter and Daniel James Caldwell. Ages 23 and 25. Couple. Location, Tunnel 14. Entry date, June 7, 95. Notes, more difficult. Male subject attempted escape. Female subject remained conscious longer than expected. Sealed together as requested. Marcus was reading over her shoulder. As requested? Who was making requests? Sarah flipped through more pages. Each entry detailed another victim. Names, ages, locations. All disappearances that had been classified as missing persons or presumed accidents. And all connected to Raymond Weber. But at the back of a ledger, the handwriting changed. The entries became more erratic, more detailed, more disturbing. And they were signed differently. Not with Weber's initials, but with 2 letters, DK. There was someone else, Sarah said. Weber wasn't working alone. At the very back of the ledger, tucked into a small pocket, was a photograph. Sarah pulled it out. It showed 2 men standing in front of a Forest Service vehicle. One was older, probably in his 50s, wearing a ranger uniform. The other was younger, maybe early 30s, also in uniform. On the back of the photo, written in faded ink, Ray and David. Cascade Junction. Summer 92. Sarah turned the photo over again, studying the younger man's face. We need to find David K. They spent the next hour searching the cabin. In a small bedroom at the back, they found more evidence. Boxes of personal items that clearly didn't belong to Weber. Driver's licenses, wallets, watches, jewelry. All taken from victims. Sarah counted them. 32 items. 18 confirmed victims in the ledger. That meant there were at least 14 more they didn't know about. And in the closet, hanging on a hook, was a Forest Service jacket. But it wasn't Weber's. The name tag read, D. Kellerman. Sarah photographed everything, then called for a full forensic team. While they waited, she ran the name David Kellerman through the database. He came up immediately. David Anthony Kellerman, born November 2nd, 1961. Hired by the U.S. Forest Service in 1984. Worked under Raymond Weber from 1985 to 1998. And here's where it got interesting. In 1998, Kellerman had been investigated for inappropriate conduct with a female hiker who reported he had followed her on a trail and made threatening comments. The investigation was inconclusive. Kellerman resigned before any formal charges were filed. After that, his trail went cold. No tax records. No property ownership. No vehicle registration. It was like he had vanished. But Sarah had a feeling he hadn't vanished. She had a feeling he was still out there. Still continuing the pattern. Back at headquarters, Sarah assembled a task force. They cross-referenced every missing person case in Colorado from 1993 to the present, focusing on cases involving hikers, campers, or anyone who had disappeared in wilderness areas. The results were staggering. Over the past 30 years, 41 people had vanished in circumstances similar to Emily and Daniel. Most were assumed to be accidents. Some were thought to be voluntary disappearances. But when Sarah mapped them out, a clear geographic pattern emerged. All 41 cases fell within a 50-mile radius of the old Cascade Junction mining area. And they occurred, with eerie regularity, every 2 years. Sometimes one victim, sometimes two, sometimes three, but always tied to that same region. Always during summer months. Always hikers or campers. We're not dealing with a serial killer, Sarah said during the briefing. We're dealing with two serial killers, Raymond Weber and David Kellerman. They worked together for over a decade, using their positions with the Forest Service to identify victims, lure them to remote locations, and seal them inside abandoned mine tunnels. Weber retired in 2003, but the disappearances didn't stop. They continued, which means Kellerman kept going without him. One of the other detectives raised his hand. Do we think Weber is still alive? Sarah pulled up a death certificate. Raymond Weber died in March 2022. Natural causes. Heart failure. He was 74. But here's the thing. The last confirmed disappearance in this pattern was March 2013. After that, nothing. For 11 years, the pattern stopped. Until now. She pulled up another file. 3 weeks ago, before the wildfire started, a young couple from Boulder was reported missing. Jake and Amy Morrison, both 26. They were on a weekend camping trip. Their car was found abandoned on a Forest Service road about 6 miles from Tunnel 14. They never came home. The room fell silent. Sarah let that sink in. David Kellerman is still out there. And I think he started again. Over the next 3 days, the task force worked around the clock. They obtained a warrant to excavate the other 17 sealed tunnels in the Cascade Junction area. What they found was beyond horrific. Tunnel 4, where Brandon Mitchell had been taken in '93, contained his remains along with 2 other unidentified victims. Tunnel 7 held the bodies of Thomas and Jennifer Hayes, the couple from Wyoming. Tunnel 12 contained 5 victims, all female. All in their 20s. By the time they finished, they had recovered the remains of 38 people. Each one had been sealed inside. Each one had died alone in the darkness. Forensic analysis confirmed that most had survived for days, sometimes weeks, after being sealed in. They had died slowly, from dehydration, starvation, or exposure. It was systematic. It was methodical. And it had been hidden for 3 decades. But Emily and Daniel, they hadn't been found among the remains. Their car was in Tunnel 14, but their bodies weren't, which meant one of two things. Either they had been moved, or they had escaped. Sarah returned to Tunnel 14 with Dr. Chun and a team of forensic specialists. They searched every inch of that cave system, going deeper than they had before. About 200 feet beyond where the car was wedged, the tunnel narrowed into a natural fissure. And there, carved into the limestone wall, was something Sarah hadn't expected. Words. Scratched into the stone with something sharp. A rock, maybe, or a piece of metal. The message was simple but heartbreaking. Emily Porter and Daniel Caldwell. June 7, 1995. If you find this, we tried. We fought. Tell our families we love them. Beneath that, in smaller letters, he said his name was David. He wore a ranger uniform. He told us there was a shortcut to Cascade Point. We trusted him. Don't trust anyone. Sarah traced her fingers over the carved letters, feeling the rough edges. Emily and Daniel had survived long enough to leave this message. Long enough to understand what had happened to them. Long enough to try and warn whoever came next. Dr. Chun was examining the area around the carving. There's something else here, she said. She pointed to a narrow gap in the rock face, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. This fissure continues. It might lead to another chamber or even an exit. They pushed deeper, crawling through tight spaces, following the path Emily and Daniel might have taken. After about 50 feet, the passage opened into a larger chamber. And there, in the center, they found it. A makeshift camp. 2 sleeping bags, torn and dirty. A small pile of empty water bottles. A flashlight, long dead. And 2 backpacks side by side. Sarah opened the first backpack. Inside was Emily's wallet, her keys, a journal. She opened the journal carefully. The first entries were normal. Descriptions of the drive, excitement about the trip, little observations about the landscape. But then the tone changed. June 8th. We've been in here for a day. The door is sealed. We can't get it open. Daniel thinks there might be another way out. We're going to try to find it. If anyone reads this, please know we didn't give up. June 9th. We found water dripping from the ceiling. We're rationing it. Daniel is staying strong. I'm trying to stay strong too. The ranger who brought us here, David, he said this was a maintenance inspection. He said we'd be out in an hour. He lied. I don't know why he did this. I don't understand. June 10th. Daniel broke through a wall today. There's a passage. We're going to follow it. We're going to get out. We have to. The entries stop there. Sarah closed the journal and looked at Dr. Chun. They made it this far. They survived at least 3 days. But where did they go from here? They searched the chamber and found the passage Emily had mentioned. It led upward toward the surface. It was steep, treacherous, filled with loose rocks and narrow ledges. But it was possible. It was a way out. Sarah and her team followed it. They climbed for nearly an hour, using ropes and harnesses. And finally, they emerged. Not at the sealed tunnel entrance, but half a mile away, hidden behind a thick grove of pine trees. They had found the exit Emily and Daniel had been searching for. But if they made it out, where were they now? Sarah stood in the sunlight, breathing hard, trying to piece it together. If Emily and Daniel escaped through this passage, they would have been disoriented, dehydrated, possibly injured. They would have needed help. Sarah pulled out her phone and called Marcus. I need you to pull records for any emergency room visits, urgent care clinics, or even veterinary clinics within a 100-mile radius of this location in June of '95. Look for anyone treated for dehydration, cuts, bruises, anything consistent with being trapped underground. You think they made it out? Marcus asked. I think they tried. 2 hours later, Marcus called back. I found something. June 11th, '95. A small clinic in Morrison, about 40 miles southeast of the tunnel location. 2 patients checked in. No names given. Paid in cash. Both treated for severe dehydration and minor lacerations. The doctor on duty noted they seemed disoriented and refused to say what happened. They left before he could call anyone. Sarah felt her heart race. Do we have descriptions? Female, early 20s, blonde. Male, mid-20s, dark hair, glasses. Sarah, it's them. Where did they go after that? No idea. The clinic didn't keep detailed records back then. But there's one more thing. The nurse who checked them in, she's still alive. Lives in Littleton now. I've got her number. Sarah called immediately. The woman's name was Patricia Brennan, now in her 70s, retired. Ms. Brennan, my name is Detective Sarah Ortiz. I'm calling about 2 patients you treated in June of 1995 at the Morrison Medical Clinic. There was a long pause. I remember them, Patricia said quietly. I never forgot them. They looked like they'd been through hell. Can you tell me anything about them? Anything they said? The girl, she was terrified. Kept looking over her shoulder like someone was following them. The boy was trying to hold it together, but you could see he was barely keeping it together. I asked them if they needed me to call the police. The girl grabbed my arm and begged me not to. She said if I called anyone, he would find them. She said they just needed to disappear. Did she say who he was? Sarah asked. She said it was a ranger. A Forest Service ranger. She said he had done something terrible and that no one would believe them because he had a badge. She said they were going to run and never come back. Sarah closed her eyes. Did they say where they were going? No. But after they left, I found something in the exam room. A piece of paper. It had 2 phone numbers on it. I kept it all these years because I always wondered if I should have done more to help them. Ms. Brennan, I need those numbers. Can you read them to me? Patricia gave her the numbers. Sarah thanked her and hung up. She immediately ran both numbers through reverse lookup databases. The first number came back as disconnected, but the second number, listed in 1995, belonged to a residence in Portland, Oregon. The name on the account, Margaret Porter, Emily's mother. Sarah's hands trembled as she dialed the number. It rang 4 times before someone picked up. Hello. The voice was elderly, cautious. Is this Margaret Porter? Sarah asked. Yes. Who is this? Ms. Porter, my name is Detective Sarah Ortiz. I'm calling from Denver. I'm investigating the disappearance of your daughter, Emily, in 1995. There was a sharp intake of breath. My daughter is dead, Detective. She's been dead for 29 years. Ms. Porter, I have reason to believe Emily may have survived. I think she made it out. I think she's been hiding all this time. The silence on the other end stretched for what felt like an eternity. Then, in a whisper, you need to stop looking for her. Ma'am, Emily contacted me once. Just once. In 1996. She told me she was alive, but that I could never tell anyone. She said if anyone knew, he would find her. He would kill her. And probably me too. She made me promise I would never speak her name again. She said she was dead as far as the world was concerned, and it had to stay that way. Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes. Ms. Porter, the man who did this to her, he's dead. He died 2 years ago, but his partner is still out there. And I think Emily might be the only person who can identify him. Margaret's voice was shaking now. I haven't spoken to my daughter in 28 years, Detective. I don't know where she is. I don't know if she's even still alive. But if she is, she spent 3 decades running. And I'm not going to be the one who brings him back into her life. Ms. Porter, please. There are other victims. Families who need closure. Emily's testimony could. No. The word was final. If my daughter wants to come forward, that's her choice. But I won't make it for her. Leave her alone, Detective. Let her have the peace she's fought so hard to build. The line went dead. Sarah sat in her car, staring at the phone. Emily Porter was alive. She had escaped. She had survived. But she had spent 29 years in hiding, living under a different name, always looking over her shoulder, always afraid that David Kellerman would find her. And Daniel Caldwell? Sarah searched databases for his name. She found a death certificate. Daniel James Caldwell. Died September 3rd, 1996. Denver, Colorado. Cause of death, suicide. He had survived the tunnel. He had escaped with Emily. But he hadn't survived the aftermath. The trauma, the fear, the knowledge of what had been done to them. It had been too much. He took his own life 14 months after they escaped. Emily had lost everything. Her identity, her family, her future, her partner. All because she trusted a man in a uniform who told her he knew a shortcut. But Sarah couldn't let it end there. Not when David Kellerman was still out there. Not when Jake and Amy Morrison were still missing. She returned to Raymond Weber's cabin with a team of forensic psychologists and criminal profilers. They studied every detail, looking for patterns, clues, anything that might tell them where Kellerman had gone. In a locked shed behind the cabin, they found more evidence. Maps, dozens of them, covering areas all over the western United States. Colorado, Wyoming, Montana, Utah. And each map had markings. Potential sites. Locations where someone with knowledge of remote wilderness areas could continue the pattern. One map, dated 2024, had a fresh marking. A circle in red ink. The location, 11 miles north of the original tunnel sites. A place called Devil's Canyon. Sarah assembled a tactical team. They approached Devil's Canyon at dawn, moving silently through dense forest. The area was remote, accessible only by foot. After 2 hours of hiking, they found what they were looking for. A small camp recently used. A tent, a fire pit with warm ashes supplies. And tied to a tree, barely conscious, were Jake and Amy Morrison. They were alive. Dehydrated, terrified, but alive. Sarah cut them free, while the tactical team secured the perimeter. "Where is he?" Sarah asked Amy. Amy's eyes were wide with fear. "He left 2 days ago. He said he had to check something. He said he'd be back." "Did he tell you his name?" "David," Amy whispered. "He said his name was David." The team searched the camp. In David Kellerman's tent, they found a journal similar to the one Raymond Weber had kept. But this one was more detailed, more disturbing. It described every victim, every abduction, every sealed tunnel. And it described something else. A philosophy. A twisted belief that Kellerman had developed over decades. He believed he was saving people, taking them from a corrupt world and giving them peace in the darkness. He believed the tunnels were sacred spaces, that the victims were chosen, that their deaths were meaningful. It was the mindset of a man who had completely detached from reality. A man who had convinced himself that what he was doing was right. At the back of the journal was a list. Future targets. People Kellerman had been watching. And at the top of that list was a name that made Sarah's blood run cold. Emily Porter. He knew. Somehow, despite everything, despite her new identity, despite 29 years of hiding, David Kellerman knew Emily was alive. And he had been looking for her. Sarah immediately contacted the U.S. Marshal Service. They put out a federal warrant for David Anthony Kellerman. His photo was distributed to every law enforcement agency in the country. And then they waited. 3 days passed. No sign of Kellerman. It was like he had vanished into the wilderness. The same wilderness he had used to hide his crimes for so long. But on the 4th day, Sarah received a phone call from an unknown number. She answered cautiously. Detective Ortiz. There was breathing on the other end. Then, a woman's voice, quiet but strong. "This is Emily Porter. My mother told me you've been looking for me." Sarah almost dropped the phone. "Emily, thank you for calling. I know this must be incredibly difficult. She told me you found the tunnel. She told me you found Daniel's message." Emily's voice broke slightly. "I've spent my whole life trying to forget that place. Trying to forget what he did to us. Emily, I'm so sorry. I can't imagine what you've been through. But I need your help. David Kellerman is still out there. And I think he's looking for you." There was a long pause. "I know. I've seen him." Sarah's heart stopped. "What? When?" 3 months ago. I was living in Seattle, working as a nurse. I saw him in the hospital cafeteria. He was wearing civilian clothes, but I recognized him immediately. The way he moved, the way he looked at people. I knew it was him. I left that night. Changed my name again. Moved to another city. But I can't keep running forever. Emily, we can protect you. We can put you in witness protection. But we need your testimony. You're the only person who can positively identify him. You're the only one who escaped. Emily was quiet for a long time. If I do this, if I come forward, he'll know where I am. We'll make sure he can't get to you. I promise. Another long silence. Then, okay, tell me where to go. 2 days later, Emily Porter walked into the Denver Metro Police Department. She was 48 years old now, no longer the 23-year-old girl in the photographs. Her blonde hair was darker, shorter. Her face carried lines that spoke of years of stress and fear. But her eyes, those were the same. Sharp, alert, always watching. Sarah met her in a private conference room. They sat across from each other, and for a moment, neither spoke. Then Emily said, "I never thought I'd tell the story. I thought I'd take it to my grave." "You don't have to do this alone," Sarah said gently. "Take your time." Emily nodded and began. She described that day in June 1995. How she and Daniel had been so excited about their trip. How they'd stopped for gas and asked for directions. How a friendly Forest Service ranger had pulled up beside them at a scenic overlook and offered to show them a shortcut to a hidden waterfall. How they'd followed him, trusting his uniform, his badge, his authority. How he led them down a series of Forest Service roads until they were deep in the wilderness. How he'd told them to park their car and follow him on foot. How he'd walked them into that tunnel, telling them it was a cool geological formation they had to see. How the moment they stepped inside, he'd pulled out a gun. How he'd sealed them in. How they'd screamed and pounded on that door until their hands bled. How they'd spent 3 days in the darkness before Daniel found the passage. How they'd climbed and crawled and fought their way out. How they'd stumbled to that clinic, terrified and broken. How they'd run, changed their names, tried to build new lives. How Daniel had struggled with nightmares and paranoia until he couldn't take it anymore. How Emily had been alone for 28 years, always looking over her shoulder, always afraid. When she finished, there were tears streaming down her face. "He took everything from us," she whispered. "Our future, our freedom, our lives. And he's still out there, doing it to other people." Sarah reached across the table and took Emily's hand. "Not for much longer. With your testimony, we'll find him. And we'll make sure he never hurts anyone again." The task force used Emily's description and details to narrow down Kellerman's possible locations. They focused on remote wilderness areas in states where similar disappearances had occurred in recent years. And then they got a break. A hiker in Montana reported seeing a man matching Kellerman's description at a remote campground near Glacier National Park. He was traveling alone, driving an old Jeep, and had camping supplies that suggested he was planning to stay in the area for an extended period. Federal agents moved in. They set up surveillance around the campground. And on August 15, 2024, they spotted him. David Anthony Kellerman. Now 63 years old, gray-haired, weathered, but still strong. He was sitting by a campfire, cooking dinner, as if he didn't have a care in the world. The arrest was swift and coordinated. A team of U.S. Marshals moved in at dawn, surrounding his campsite. Kellerman didn't run. He didn't resist. He simply looked up at them with an expression that was almost serene and said, "I wondered when you'd finally figure it out." In his tent, they found evidence linking him to at least 43 victims over 3 decades. Maps, photographs, journals, personal items. He had kept everything. Every detail of every crime. It was a compulsion, a need to document his work. During his interrogation, Kellerman showed no remorse. He spoke calmly about the victims, referring to them by numbers rather than names. He described the tunnels as temples, and the sealing process as rituals. He claimed he was giving people peace, removing them from a world that didn't deserve them. He was delusional, narcissistic, and utterly without empathy. But when investigators mentioned Emily Porter, something shifted in his expression. "She wasn't supposed to survive," he said quietly. "None of them were. But she was clever, stronger than I anticipated. I've thought about her often over the years. I always knew I'd see her again." "You'll never see her again," Sarah told him. "She's alive, she's safe, and she's going to make sure you spend the rest of your life in a cell." Kellerman smiled. "She'll never be free, Detective. Even if I'm locked up, even if I die, she'll still be running." Because I'm in her head. I'll always be in her head. Sarah leaned forward. No. You're just a monster who preyed on innocent people. And now you're nothing. The trial began 6 months later. Emily Porter took the stand and testified for 4 hours, describing in detail what David Kellerman had done to her and Daniel. Her testimony was powerful, devastating, and unshakable. The defense tried to discredit her, but she never wavered. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. David Anthony Kellerman was found guilty on 43 counts of kidnapping and murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. But the story didn't end there, because Emily Porter didn't disappear again. She stayed. She worked with the families of the other victims, helping them find closure. She testified in additional cases as more evidence was uncovered. She became an advocate for missing persons and wilderness safety. And slowly, over months and years, she began to reclaim the life that had been stolen from her. On June 7, 2026, 31 years to the day after she and Daniel entered that tunnel, Emily stood at a memorial service in the mountains. 43 names were read aloud. 43 lives remembered. 43 families given answers. At the end of the service, Emily placed a stone at the base of a memorial plaque. On the stone, she had written, "Daniel James Caldwell, you fought. You never gave up. You got us out. I'll carry you with me, always." Detective Sarah Ortiz stood beside her, and together they looked out at the mountains, those same mountains that had hidden so much darkness for so long. "Do you think you'll ever feel completely safe?" Sarah asked quietly. Emily thought about it for a moment, then shook her head. "No, I don't think I ever will. But I'm not running anymore. And that's enough." The sun was setting behind the peaks, casting long shadows across the memorial. The wind moved through the trees, carrying with it the scent of pine and earth. And for the first time in 31 years, Emily Porter let herself cry. Not tears of fear or trauma, but tears of release. Because the tunnels were sealed. The monster was caged. And she was finally, truly, standing in the light. If you've stayed with us through this incredible and heartbreaking journey, thank you. Stories like Emily's remind us of the resilience of the human spirit and the importance of never giving up on finding the truth. If you want to hear more deeply researched true crime cases that honor the victims and celebrate the investigators who bring justice, make sure you're subscribed to Ultimate Crime Stories. We're dedicated to bringing you the most compelling mysteries from across America, told with respect and thorough investigation. Hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you in the next case.